Hey guys, RJ here, and oh my god, this show, like every time I see an episode of 13 Reasons Why, I don't think it could get any better. I don't think that it can keep me hooked the entire episode, but I'm pretty sure I wasn't breathing during this one. As with all the videos we upload, if you have not seen episode 4 of 13 Reasons Why on Netflix, turn this review off, go watch it on Netflix, come back here. I don't want to ruin anything for you. So the beginning scene for this episode is just fantastic, right? You have Hannah basically whispering to Clay saying like, this is when you have to be quiet. You got to sneak out in the middle of the night, and just watching Clay like try to be sneaky, like sneaking out of his house and stuff, propping open the window. And then of course he eats shit, getting down off the roof. I just absolutely lost it at that. Clay is then instructed to go outside of an unnamed house and kind of hang out in the backyard. And I really like the way they do this scene where Hannah is like outside in the back, talking into a recorder and saying like, I'm here too. Like while I'm recording this, I'm sitting here doing this. And she's like, my heart is racing. And I understand like stalking can definitely give you a rush. And I just really like the way that Clay is standing there and you see like Hannah and he's like right next to her and he's about to reach out to her. And then Marcus shows up. And throughout this whole episode, which I think we all know really the reason why here, but throughout this whole episode, Marcus is trying to convince Clay that pretty much everyone that's had the tapes before him has picked them up, listened to a few of them, and then passed them on to, like the next name on the list. They're not actually listening to the content of the tapes, and I think it's pretty obvious to both Clay and a lot of other people that he's lying. So we move on to this cute little bit where Clay is walking Hannah home after work, and, he obviously is mad at himself for not either one kissing her or, just not talking to her, telling her how he feels. And he's like, you idiot, like, come back, drive the other way. And yeah, I really like that part. So Hannah goes up to her house, and this is the first time in which she actually hears her stalker. She hears the camera shutter going off, and she's like, she like looks around, she doesn't see anything. She goes inside, and basically the stalker comes over to her window, and she's like too scared to even get up and like turn out like or close the blinds and stuff. And she just hears this like constant, shudder of her while she's sleeping. And I mean, I'd be freaked out too. If I know that someone is like 5 feet outside of my window, you bet I'm not gonna be able to sleep at night. Then we see this really powerful scene where they're doing the suicide prevention clinic and Clay's mom is actually there. I don't know if this is just for Clay or just because she's an involved parent, but yeah, she's sitting there and listening to Mr. Porter and the principal talk about suicide prevention. It's a very generic high school thing. They try to clean up the mess after something bad has happened. They're trying to prevent more of these things from happening. And then Miss Baker comes in and she basically just lays them all out. Not just the principal, but all of the other parents in the room too. She ends up bringing up, she ends up reading off her phone the picture she took of the bathroom stalls, and she's like, your kids say cunt, your kids say bitch, your kids say cum dumpster. And yeah, it's amazing to me that she actually had the cojones to just go in there and just be like freaking frank with everybody. I absolutely love Mrs. Baker as a character. And because of Mrs. Baker's actions, the principal and Mr. Porter then go to said bathrooms, look at said walls, and see all of these things written. And Mr. Porter's like, okay, like, yeah, this isn't great, but it's not all that bad. But like, they don't know about that because students and principals and teachers, they all have separate bathrooms. They're never going in these kids' bathrooms, so they never have to actually see this stuff. And just the way that they react to it, they're like, wow, okay, maybe we didn't know about this. And then they go over to the boys' room, and you see the door shut, and all you hear is, oh my God. So I think a lot of people might have not picked up on this, but in one of the flashbacks of a class pretty much that Clay is in, there's an English teacher at the front, and she's actually describing one of my favorite books, Beyond Good and Evil. And she uses a quote in there that says, whomever is fighting monsters must make sure not to become a monster himself. And this is clearly kind of foreshadowing what happens later on in this episode. Clay in general is just very confused. He's very conflicted, and I don't blame him at this point, but you have people like Marcus and that whole group trying to befriend him and like invite him over to things. And obviously it's for alternative purposes, but they're still trying to mess with his head. And, at times I think it is kind of moving his personality in different directions than what he would be normally just listening to these tapes without any outside interference. But Clay is a good kid. He ends up not dealing with them this episode, which I really like, but he ends up riding his bike around. And he sees these people throwing TP on Hannah Baker's house. He goes in, yells at them, and then starts cleaning it up. Miss Baker catches him, and then we get our first scene with Clay and Mrs. Baker. And this whole set of scenes between Miss Baker and Clay is just, it really hit me hard. I mean, just seeing a mom get as emotional as she is over a child that she's lost, all reasonably so, it was extremely powerful for me. Clay sitting there, trying to answer things to the best of his ability without talking about the tapes. And I mean, at some point, I think Miss Baker will be brought into what is going on, or I'm assuming at the end of this, maybe. But in general, she's just seeking closure, and she can tell Clay is maybe similar to her daughter a little bit. And just that fact alone kind of tips her off, like, I need to bring this kid inside. I need to see who he is. Like, he says he's a friend of Hannah, and he doesn't seem like the other boys that she's probably dealt with at this point. And I mean, Clay does set himself apart. He is socially awkward. He's quiet. So I can see why she starts questioning him. And yeah, she's basically trying to get anything out of him that she can about, why Hannah might have done this. Throughout this whole thing, they are kind of interchanging scenes with the Hannah and Courtney storyline, right? They are showing them kind of becoming friends in class, and then eventually they meet up at Courtney's house, and they get a light from them because basically Hannah has coincided with Courtney saying, like, I have a stalker, and, I don't know what to do. I can't sleep at all anymore. I'm super scared all the time. So Courtney, being the, nice girl that she is, she kind of says, oh, I'll help you out with that. So they end up grabbing this light from her dad's garage, and they go over to Hannah's house. They have a couple of drinks, trying to get some liquid courage in there. And then a dangerous game of truth or dare starts. And this ends up leading kind of Courtney and Hannah kissing. And then, of course, we have our stalker outside who ends up taking a picture of this. Hannah decides to kill, because I mean, I'm pretty sure she's not a lesbian, but she ends up kind of putting a stop to the makeout session that her and Courtney are having, shines a light on Courtney, and then turns around and shines a light on their stalker. And this is when we find out. I mean, we kind of already knew because we knew it was his tape, but we end up finding out that it was Tyler Down. Hannah then tries to confront Tyler at school the next day, and Courtney's really awkward around her, doesn't want to talk about what happened. And so Hannah goes and talks to Tyler, says, give me all the photos you have of me. Like, stop this. Like, you can't just do this. And then Tyler has the audacity to then ask her out, basically. Like, hey, do you want to hang out sometime? And Hannah isn't laughing at him because of who he is, because I don't think Hannah's that kind of person at all. She's laughing at him because he just got done stalking her last night, making her life like a living hell. And then he decides that he also wants to ask her out. And it's just plain ridiculous on Tyler's part. But this ends up basically setting him off, because I'm guessing he took it the opposite way, where she thinks that, like, he's just never going to be good enough for him or for her. And so he decides to have some retribution and releases one of the photos that kind of looks like Hannah and Courtney. But as Hannah states, nobody actually ever truly knows that it was them making out, and thus starts the wheel. So at the end of this, Clay kind of has a dinner with Tony, and Tony, tries to eventually explain what he was doing at the abandoned park. He was just beating up a guy that touched his sister inappropriately. And so pretty much, he's kind of absolved for that. And I figured Tony seems like a great guy to me so far. Am I saying he's perfect? No. But is he husband material? Yes. So after that dinner, Clay eventually, we thought he might be going over to go and see Justin and Alex and all of them who are hanging out at Bryce's. And they actually get a delivery, and they all like freak out and run to the front, and they see a box. It's a perfect rectangle, just like the tapes came in. And so they rip it open really fast, and lo and behold, it is a set of golf balls for Bryce's family to use. That was just perfect. Like, they're hoping to go get their savior from that box, and it ends up being a bunch of balls. Clay then decides to kind of steal Tony's quote about creating his own set of justice, and then decides to go back to Tyler's house, stand outside of his window. Instead of throwing a rock like all the other kids did, he actually takes a picture of Tyler's little derriere and basically sends his butt to everyone, half the school. And this is, probably a fair punishment, but also we remember that quote from earlier. It seems like Clay might have becoming a little bit more of a monster than he originally intended. And I think Tony kind of says it best to Clay, that's not what Hannah would have wanted for you. And I mean, Tony clearly knows a lot more things than the rest of us do at this point, but he's just looking out for Clay. And the moment that Clay officially realizes that, and that Tony is not his enemy at all, I think that's really going to help Clay out as a character. But yeah, guys, that is pretty much all I have for this episode. I just cannot believe how well this thing is shot. The soundtrack, once again, is just spectacular. I don't know how else to say it. The visuals are still great. The acting is still being. I just can't believe I've never heard or seen any of these actors before. Netflix is great at going and finding people. Maybe I have seen these guys in something before, but they must have not been that memorable. They just all fit their roles extremely well. I don't really see any bad lines delivered. The script seems great. I'm trying to find faults in this show, and I really can't. So yeah, that's a wrap, guys. Subscribe to us here on YouTube if you haven't already. We do a ton of coverage on multiple different shows like The Expanse, Westworld, Big Little Lies, obviously 13 Reasons Why. And yeah, we're just going to have a ton of new content coming out over the next couple of months as we kind of ramp up production here at OBB. And yeah, just follow us here. Follow us on social media. Like this video if you liked it. Dislike it if you really hate what I do, I guess. But until next time, guys, we'll see you soon.